Esquire's Career Strategies 1 gives you the information to succeed in today's complex business world. You get personal direction from people at the top of their careers, the chief executive officers of some of America's most competitive companies. Guidance from the fast-track managers who run their careers with the same intensity they run their divisions. Information from the business schools and the authors who know business from the outside in.
And with a special video essay taking a look at the big picture, the inimitable Dick Cavett.
Oh, and I'm working with Richard Hart, the host of the show.
But first, we'll hear from Philip Moffat, editor-in-chief of Esquire magazine.
In his Park Avenue editorial offices, he tracks the concerns of today's America. He thinks about his own job 7 days a week, and so do many of his readers.
From its inception in the 1930s, Esquire has always featured people of great accomplishment in the pages of the magazine. People in arts, people in politics, and people in business. But in the last few years, we've found an increasing demand for information about successful people in their careers. Readers seem to be curious not only about how people have succeeded in the world, but how they're living with that success once they've achieved it.
I'm Richard Hart. At one time, ambition and determination were enough to fuel our advancement. But today, we're looking for more. We want information to power our careers.
This tape is a selection of top-level advice for you to use in mapping your professional future. It's divided into several sections, including how to develop specific managerial skills, what is proper career development, and a section on advanced career topics. But it all begins with you and a look at the information you need to achieve both success and satisfaction in the years ahead. For generations, Harvard Business School has been the professional's most authoritative source of that information. In 1972, a new course was added to the curriculum here. It was called Self-Assessment and Career Development. The school administration had questions about the value of such a course. They were answered by its emergence as one of the most popular in the institution. Professor John Cotter helped launch that course and still teaches it today. He knows what people are looking for when they enroll, and he knows where they need to start to find their answers.
All the evidence we have suggests that the place you've got to start is inside. The relevant questions are, who am I? What am I good at? What do I like? What do I hate? What kind of people do I like to be with? What turns me on over the long run is going to make my work life satisfying, etc.
The whole business of skill identification is crucial to know what kind of job to go for and what kind of place to look for.
Richard Bowles has been called the most influential leader in the whole career planning field. His book, What Color is Your Parachute, has appeared on the New York Times bestseller list for as many as 5 years, and he's been revising it each year since it first appeared in 1972.
The most important thing in self-assessment is to know what your skills are. You have to know, for example, whether you love most to work with data or people or things or all three and in which preference. You have to know what skills, not only what skills you have. When we do skill analysis with people, we find, or they do it for themselves, we find they have about 700 skills. So the issue is, which ones do you most enjoy? Which ones do you want to use the most? Which ones give you the greatest satisfaction?
There are all kinds of ways that you can come to grips with kind of who you are, none of which require mysticism. I mean, the fundamental process is simply sitting down and looking at your life.
Some people hate to do it, so you're not going to tell them they should do it every year. But I think whenever they're getting hazy, whenever they're thinking, I'm not so sure I still enjoy using this skill, that's when they ought to sit down and do self-assessment.
In assessing ourselves, how do we make our measurements? Well, one of the traditional yardsticks of human ability is intelligence, and our traditional unit of measurement has been the IQ score. But in recent years, career specialists have come up with a different standard for measuring our abilities in terms of something called practical intelligence.
Dr. Richard Boyatzis is a psychologist who specializes in management consulting.
Intelligence in terms of IQ scores and grades, although are very highly associated, don't predict people who are going to do well at various professions. That's not to say you don't need to be smart. What most people mean when they talk about practical intelligence is the savvy. It's the how you think about things. It's the various forms of analytic reasoning ability.
And for an example of the difference between IQ and what he describes as practical intelligence, meet one of the most intelligent men of all time. Then ask yourself whether, when it came right down to it, you'd like to have Albert Einstein running the company you work for. Probably not, because practical intelligence includes attributes like people skills, innovation, flexibility, not the good doctor's strong suits, but they are the strengths of the CEOs you'll learn from in career strategies. Executives like Gary Shansby, America's youngest CEO when he took on Shackley Corporation. He directed the health products company in its growth from family business to Fortune 500. Jane Evans, the person who calls the shots at Monet Jewelry, one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country. Peter McGowan, who started at the Safeway checkout counter and now runs 2,600 stores. Fred O'Green began his career by helping create the U.S. space program and has gone on to restructure giant Litton Industries. You'll see experience is necessary for practical intelligence, but youth is no obstacle. Ask Jeff Campbell, crowned ruler of Burger King early in his career. He pushed it to a strong #2 in the burger market. Or Tom Volpe, head of Hambrecht & Quist venture capital firm, and at 33, one of the youngest CEOs in finance. All of these executives are bright, but it's not so much their reasoning ability that counts. It's how they use it.
Obviously, there are aspects of your abilities that an IQ score doesn't measure, but that are critical to your career prospects. And according to most career specialists today, one of the most fundamental involves your abilities with other people.
I think there's certainly more than one important people skill that managers must cultivate. And the most critical ones really have to do with communication. I think #1 is the ability to what I call constructively listen. Really good managers have to be able to listen to their people and really give good feedback. And I think the second most important skill is the ability to really say what you mean.
Colin Klippen is a vice president in charge of the Bank of America's automated treasury services. But it's not computers that matter most to him. It's the 137 people he works with day in and day out.
People skills are very varied. I would say sensitivity, understanding of how to motivate people. What is an individual's hot button? Can you look at a person and say, to motivate this person, to get them to achieve an objective for the organization, do I have to hammer them? Do I have to cajole them? Do I have to stroke them?
Most of the people I've seen fail, in my experience, have not failed because they lack technical expertise. They failed because they couldn't get along with anybody. People didn't like working with them. They couldn't get results out of anybody. They alienated people instead of getting their cooperation. And I've gone through some very tough situations myself where I've had to terminate people who had lots of experience and lots of ability and worked their tails off, but just couldn't get along.
In learning to develop people skills, it's extremely important to get in touch with yourself. To perhaps have a mentor or a friend that'll tell you what you're doing well and what you're not doing so well, and take constructive criticism. Ask people, do I relate well to others? Am I a good leader? Am I an inspiration to be around? Do I repeat myself too often? What do I do well? What could I do better? And if you ask these kinds of questions of not only yourself, but others around you, you'll learn how to develop those skills.
In the arts, we call it creativity. In business, it's innovation. It amounts to more than an ability to change, something more like an appetite for things that are new, different, and better.
I happen to think that people in general, American people in particular, which is a broader topic, are particularly innovative and creative individuals. I think it's endemic to this country, a lot of different aspects and the reason why it happens, but I think big companies tend to stifle that. As much as they say that they're interested in doing it, the structures are just simply not in place for people to truly try and be innovative or make improvements individually, because they're simply...
Tom Volpe learned business innovation at Hambrecht & Quist, backers of Apple Computer and People Express, where creativity is critical to profits.
But I think in most companies, even at those big companies, people that can overcome those hurdles and truly be innovators and take some risks, ultimately, if they are capable people, end up doing much better within those big companies.
As general counsel to Transamerica, James Lockhart took the idea of putting their car rental subsidiary into airports and made it happen.
To do anything today the way you did it 10 or 15 years ago is virtually obsolete. So you have to be innovative. You have to come up with new ideas and new approaches to things. One, because you've got a lot of competitors out there, and if you don't come up with a different way of doing something better than they do it, you won't be competing very well very long.
Robert Waterman had an innovative idea. He co-authored a readable business book.
My feeling is that most of us have a lot of innovative qualities sort of within us. Some maybe more than others. But all you have to do is get 10 people in a room and start doing some brainstorming. And you find that people, by and large, really do have a lot of ideas. And so I think the basic innovative quality is there. The problem for the organization is to bring it out in individuals.
I think more importantly than being able to innovate oneself as you go up the ladder is really being able to judge when there's a good innovation or when you're dealing with people who tend to be innately innovative. And the more that one can do as a manager to really bring that out of somebody, again, that really helps in terms of your being a good manager to others.
Peter McGowan is a second-generation CEO, following his father as the head of the country's second-largest retailer, Safeway Stores. By fostering innovation, he's made a big mark of his own on Safeway's profits.
I think in the last few years, Safeway has begun to develop a reputation for being innovative that it didn't have before. Our liquor barns, which are discount stores selling beer, wine, and liquor, was the idea of really one employee, fairly at that time low-level employee. And he said, I think that this kind of a store concept would be very successful. We could take a grocery store that was unsuccessful as a grocery store and convert it to some other use. We said, why is anybody going to come to a store that only sells beer, wine, and liquor? And he said, well, we could have the combination of the lowest prices and the widest selection. And we said, well, one store, what have we got to lose? Go off and try it. And so out of that one store in Colma, California, we now have a business, $300 million a year in sales, 100 stores. We're the largest seller of beer, wine, and liquor in the country.
Anyone who can demonstrate any creativity in any organization is generally going to move. People are going to respond to that. I find nothing more exciting than seeing someone, middle management, lower management, upper management, any place in our company, who comes up with a new way of looking at things. You immediately mark that person and watch them. So that's a great skill, and it helps folks stand out. And it's really, really needed.
Business is change. Just ask the makers of the linotype machine about the effect of computer typesetting. To keep yourself from being sidelined as an antique, you need a key personal attribute.
Flexibility is one of the key skills of the manager of the future. The reason is that we're moving into a competitive environment which is increasingly complex, increasingly demanding, increasingly competitive. As a result of this, you've got to be very flexible to be able to adjust rapidly to changes that might happen overnight.
Stanford Research Institute psychologist Dr. Robert Kelly has made what he describes as gold-collar workers the subject of a special study.
some of the criteria of the gold-collar workers and good managers of gold-collar workers are that they're flexible, they're able to be innovative, they're risk takers, they're capable of managing themselves, and they're able to bring diverse perspectives to bear on complex and difficult issues. So flexibility is such a key factor in a world that's changing rapidly, because those people that can't change and keep up with the changes are those that get left behind.
Jane Evans' career world has changed radically many times. She's held top positions in retailing, in marketing, and in corporate development. Today, she runs Monet Jewelers.
I think that it's flexibility is very difficult for some people, because that means you've got to be willing to change your mind. You've got to be willing to say, you know, that's what I thought yesterday, but I've got some new input, and based on what I know now, I want to change that decision.
Developing flexibility is hard at first because you tend to be a little frightened. You need not be, but you tend to be a little frightened. You look at your career and, gosh, I got to get this job done, and you worry about getting it done. But it's kind of like being a senior in college versus being a freshman in college. You study less and usually get better results. In business, as you develop flexibility through time, you normally are more relaxed, more confident, and you get the results much easier.
Things are going to change all the time. Rules are going to change, priorities are going to change, managements will change, the marketplace will change. And if you are the kind of person who really gets thrown for a loss every time something like that happens, find another thing to do for a living. Don't work in a big organization. Don't work in business. Don't be an entrepreneur. Flexibility is, that is a survival skill. You cannot make it at all if you're not flexible.
It's clear that one of your most important professional assets is yourself. So give yourself a once-over every now and then. Here's one to conclude this look at building the person. How much do you know about yourself, your career likes and dislikes, your strengths and weaknesses? The consensus is that self-assessment is one of your most important personal assignments. How do you rate your people skills? How good a listener are you? Do others listen to you? Do you really enjoy people? Most executives spend at least half their working hours working with other people. How would you rate your aptitude for innovation, for finding a better way to do things, for putting improvements to work? Creative thinking is one of the most prized of personal traits in the workplace. Finally, how flexible are you? How do you respond when those new directives come fast and furious, when unexpected events mean changing all your plans? Flexibility is to a career what a suspension system is to an automobile. It carries you over those professional potholes and gets you around most of the curves. In any business situation, and especially when you're new to a company or a particular department, you're going to be making a lot of important first impressions. That puts a premium on knowing how to handle situations and people, including yourself.
Manners in the workplace is not a question of cocking your little finger like that on the teacup. It's not foppishness. It's really good communication, good working relationships. Very important.
Letitia Baldridge is an expert on etiquette. In addition to serving as protocol advisor to 4 First Ladies, she's written down the unwritten rules of business manners.
It's very important for a young executive to learn what deference means. Deference means standing up when the boss comes in, giving way down the corridor, letting somebody else precede him or her, not taking the best seat in the limo when the group gets into the car. All those little things. Being in the airport with a boss when the young executive talks the boss's ear off when the boss wants to rest and not talk or study his papers in his briefcase. These little questions of deference are something that young executives have to learn.
I found myself taking offense recently when my new boss referred to his secretary in my presence as his girl. Am I being overly sensitive?
Executives should not call their subordinates or their secretaries my girl or our girls. Women is the right term, and I've seen women executives referring to their secretaries as my girl, we'll call your girl, and that sort of thing. That should be thrown out of the vocabulary. Women are women. My secretary will call your secretary, not my girl will call your girl.
I'm one of 50 applicants for a job, and I'm looking for a way to distinguish myself. Is it acceptable to send a thank you note after an interview?
I think letter writing is one of the most important forms of communication and activities in the business world. We don't do it enough. An applicant for a position should definitely write a letter to everybody who interviews him. If he's interviewed by 4 people within the organization, he should write 4 thank you notes. Short but sweet, well written, on nice stationery. People should always present themselves properly.
How should I respond to someone who asks me to recommend them for a position that I don't think they can handle?
If somebody has asked you for a recommendation and you feel that person does not merit it, I think you have to tell that person nicely, gently. You just say, look, I can't do it, and I can't do it because I have very high standards for this kind of job. I don't think you're quite there yet because, and then name the reasons, 1, 2, 3, or maybe 4 and 5. People need to hear what's wrong with their performance and their duties.
What is the bottom line when it comes to good behavior in a business environment?
Good manners are really nothing more than the golden rule. Do unto others what you would have others do unto you. So if you really look at it in one light, it's being selfish.
Let's assume that we've got ourselves into a company industry job that fit us to some minimum degree. That's terrific. That means you're off to a good start, but that's just the beginning.
In addition to teaching career development at Harvard, Dr. John Cotter has written a book entitled Power and Influence. It deals with the second foundation of professional advancement.
If you study the careers of successful people, successful business people, for example, you discover that even though they don't talk about it, even though they very often don't even think that much about it, what they're doing between the age of 22 and 40 is establishing a power base, and a big one. A power base based on knowledge, information about the industry, the products, the technologies, the customers, what they want, etc. Power based on relationships, making sure that they create an ever-expanding network of people who respect them, who've got good, credible, communicative relationships with them, power based on a solid track record of achievements, a good reputation in the eyes of your fellow workers and in your industry, power based on personal skills that are ever expanding beyond just what you had at age 20, intellectual skills and interpersonal skills.
So a power base rests on 4 foundations. 1, learn the industry. 2, develop good working relationships industry-wide. 3, build an impressive record of your own. And 4, continue to learn and acquire skills. Note that in talking about power, Dr. Cotter isn't describing raw ambition or brute force, but the kind of power you need to get things accomplished. Even so, a power base isn't a matter of simple good fortune. It's a goal that must be sought to be achieved.
It is incredibly naive to assume that you can do well at kind of narrow little jobs for 10 or 15 years, suddenly get thrown into a job that has a scope this big, and just because you're a good fellow and work hard and are honest are going to do that. You've got to be prepared for it. And part of that preparation is what I've been calling a broader and a broader and a broader and a bigger and a deeper and a stronger power base.
One final word of advice. Be aware. Dr. Cotter says those opportunities to grow as a professional, to expand your business relationships, and demonstrate your capacity to take on more are everywhere. But if your nose is too close to the grindstone, you'll miss them.
If anything is certain about the road to the top, it's that it's rarely straight. Even if you started in a company's mailroom and wound up in its executive suite, your route would look more like a choreographer's chart than an elevator ride, taking you through as many different parts of the company, from accounting to public relations, as you could reach. Don Armiger, Vice President, Human Resources, Citicorp.
It's important to understand the basic core business of the corporation. Not only to understand it in the product sense, we sell soap, but what are the financial and the marketing dynamics involved in selling soap or whatever the product is. So one aspires to a significantly senior role in the organization. One has to think of the mix of experiences that will be helpful to them in reaching that level.
I was in a company that was growing. We've quadrupled in size, more than quadrupled, since I joined the company 14 years ago. And what I found was it seemed that as the company grew, every year there was another job opportunity if I wanted to take it, which would involve new or broader responsibilities. And so I had a golden opportunity to just take a shot every year at something new, stretch a little more, move the learning curve up a little bit more.
Jeff Campbell's career has unfolded in a single company, the Burger King Corporation. After a few years of striving, he'd become the #2 man in marketing and an officer of the company.
And I was very thrilled at being an officer of the company. And I can remember how badly I wanted it and thought it would never come. But by the time I got there, I had begun to get a taste of the rest of the business. And it dawned on me that, I'm only exposed to about 15% of the pie here, and the rest of this stuff is really intriguing. And gosh, I'd love to get exposed to it.
Getting that exposure meant getting involved in operations, and that meant giving up an executive position and starting over at the bottom.
And I did that. And I went home and explained to my wife, who just had our first baby and just moved into our new house that we had designed ourselves, and drove home in the car that I had just gotten as a corporate officer and announced to her the brilliant idea I had, which is let's move and I'll give up my title and go work in a restaurant, and maybe in a year and a half I'll be a region manager. And she said, well, why would you want to do that? And I said, because if I want to be president of this company someday, and I do, that's the way to get there.
He made the difficult move from an executive desk to a grill and was trained as a restaurant manager, and it paid off. The following year, he was back at headquarters as #1 in marketing. After 2 more rapid promotions, he got a call from the CEO.
It was unexpected, and he called me. He was out of town and said he would be in Miami the next morning, and would I meet him at 7 o'clock? And I said, sure. And he came in and told me he was leaving, which was one surprise, and then said, well, you're the guy. And so it was an interesting day.
And so, 14 years after going to work for Burger King, Jeff Campbell had become the CEO. And what advice does he have for someone starting out today?
I think the important thing in that process is if you go into any company from the day you start and set out with some limited goals, but recognize that the key to achieving any of them is learning as much as you can and producing as much as you can. Results, working well with people, stretching yourself, taking responsibility whenever it's offered, taking the risks when they come up, the performance risks. You'll probably do very well.
The one-company career path worked for Jeff Campbell. It's a classic career pattern. But there is another equally viable way to go, and that is from one company to another, and another, and another.
For Gary Shansby, that meant moving between 5 different companies and finally settling into the chairman of the board seat at the Shackley Corporation.
And I think there are 2 ways to succeed in business. One is the spiral method of jumping around to companies, and another is to stay in a company and build within it. And once again, it comes down to your own comfort level. There are people, very good friends of mine, who are CEOs of companies that they've been in those companies for 25 years. And there are other friends of mine, same types of persons, that have moved to 3, 4, 5, 6 companies. I don't think there's any set pattern for success. Certainly to move to a new company is a change. And a change is a certain amount of risk. And if you're a risk taker, it's easier to move to another company. I don't believe you get ahead faster by moving around, but if you have comfort in moving around, you feel like you can learn more, then you should do that.
One of the keys to any successful career path, especially one that leads to top-level positions, is knowing the core business of your company. If your company is Burger King, you must know about fast food franchising. If it's Shackley, you must know about nutrition. If it's Citicorp, you need to be an authority on consumer banking, and so forth. If you have that core knowledge, then whether you stay with one firm or move from one to another is your call.
Obviously, the most important thing in any successful career is to work hard and work well at whatever it is. Still in almost any company and in almost any business, a great deal depends on how that work is received, on how people perceive it, on how people perceive you. And so self-promotion, while it's come in for a bad press in general, is in fact an extremely important component in success. In short,
Michael Korda is the author of Success and Power, #1 bestsellers, as well as Charmed Lives, Worldly Goods, and Queenie. He is the editor-in-chief of Simon & Schuster, a major book publishing house, and a noted speaker on careers and business.
in short, there is no point, to use a very old and obvious cliche, in hiding your light under a bushel, assuming you have any light at all.
And the way to do that is to take that risky assignment, that visible assignment that maybe no one else wants, that they're shying away from, the transfer to the tough new plant, the district that no one else has been able to succeed in. That's how you build success for yourself. That's how you build a track record.
There are quite a few things that people can do, and some of it comes from volunteering to serve on task forces, from participating in some of the extracurricular activities that a corporation will frequently sponsor, from learning more about other departments than just your own, so that you develop visibility outside of your own area just by being curious and by wanting to know more about the company.
And one of the things that one must be extremely aware of is that a corporation looking at who are going to be the players in the future are not interested in people who have pure self-interest at heart.
The person who constantly pushes themselves forward, the person who manages to twist every particular corporate problem, every item on the agenda of the meeting round to themselves, the person who, to use their vernacular, blows their own horn constantly and loudly, is probably not going to get ahead because it's too obvious, because it annoys people, because it puts off your competitors and makes them enemies, because it may threaten people above you, and above all because it looks lousy and trashy.
A final point. The same things that will impress your boss will impress people throughout your profession. Keep the principle of self-promotion in mind whenever dealing with industry-wide organizations, when delivering an address at a convention, or when you're dealing with your company's vendors, financial partners, even its competitors. When the time comes for you to make a big move up in your career, you'll want others already aware of who you are. We've looked at you, the professional, and at building a career. Now, let's pause for a moment to consider some questions you might be asking. For example,
how can I keep track of my progress on so many different levels and fronts? Do I have to carry a checklist or a scorecard around with me?
executive career strategist John Crystal knows the same formula applies to almost any profession.
You don't have to carry a checklist in your pocket every 15 minutes take it. No. Once you learn how, and this is something you can learn, once you learn how to design as rational a plan for your own life as you're called upon to design for your employer all the time, it's in your head. Yes, you have the raw materials, the basic materials in your desk at home, but it becomes second nature.
It's easy to carry something like flexibility too far. Now, where do I draw the line between being flexible and being wishy-washy?
Being too flexible, I think people say, well, doesn't this just lead to anarchy? If you've got too much flexibility, isn't there any core? And part of the role of the new manager is to provide a vision of what holds this company together. What is it we're all trying to achieve? And who provides a framework in which to achieve the results. so that when you're being flexible within a framework. It's just not random flexibility.
A lot seems to rest on who I am, but how much can I expect to change myself? Isn't that a pretty tall order?
Wasn't it that great philosopher Will Rogers who said, when you're through changing, you're through? So that kind of change, learning new things, learning new skills, that's great. The fear is, for so many of us, that if I want to be successful, meaning promoted up, I'm going to have to pretend I'm somebody I'm not. That just isn't so. There's another lesser-known philosopher who spelled it out by saying, be yourself. Nobody else is qualified.
How can I tell if I'm suited to a particular career without wading into it?
If it's an industry, for example, you're trying to understand, then finagle your way into 2 or 3 companies in that industry, just to plant tours, anything, to get your foot in the door. And after you see 2 or 3, you'll begin to get a sense of the culture of the industry, and you can assess for yourself whether that feels good for you or doesn't make sense.
I know I'm doing a terrific job, and my secretary knows it, and the group I'm working in knows it. But we're not at the home office. Now, how do I make sure somebody there knows it?
If you have written a brilliant memorandum to somebody about some problem in business, it's not necessarily the person to whom you've sent that memo who counts. It may well be the people whom you pick to send Xeroxes to. In short, what you want is not just a direct address to the problem at hand, but also the perception on the part of a lot of people that your ideas are good, that you're addressing problems in some meaningful way, that you're articulate, that you're concerned with the company, that you, in effect, look good.
Welcome to what we call our video essay. Let's take a moment from the details of career strategies for a fun look at the big picture. To achieve a really successful career, almost everyone agrees you need 2 common senses, a sense of humor and a sense of perspective. And the man who has plenty of both is our video essayist, Dick Cavett.
We've talked a lot now about how to achieve success, but so far we've left out one semi-important point. How do you know you've arrived? When can you say, okay, that's enough, I'm successful? Well, it seems like the answer should be easy, but for most people it really isn't. Take your average multimillionaire, a Mr. Guggenheim or Mr. Getty. Are they successful? Well, you and I think so. But if you talk to these worthies, it's surprising how often they say things like, I'd be really successful if I could just close that one more big deal. Then, of course, another big deal after that. Or how about CEOs? We've been using that level of power as one standard of success. And actually, all the people we talked to not only said they felt successful, many of them radiated success. Usually it's because they feel in control, and the companies they are controlling are doing well. But at least a few CEOs aren't that sure about their success. They feel only as successful as their company's last fiscal year. The company hits a bump, the CEO feels like a bum. Apparently, almost everyone knows which general direction to go to get success, but it's not that easy to know when you've arrived. Well, just so you won't overshoot the mark, herewith a not completely serious guide to whether you've made it or not. First, take a look around your neighborhood. If the grass is all exactly the same length, but no one who lives there remembers how to use a lawnmower, that's a good sign. Whether you live in a co-op or stately home, are your living quarters big enough to lose the family in?
Mommy, where are you?
Do you drive, or are you driven? Is your briefcase very brief? Your watch so thin it looks like a gold tattoo? At work, does the security guard salute you?
Good morning, sir.
When employees talk to you, does it feel like they're giving you a mental shoe shine?
I can really do that good. Come on, boss.
Does a secretary place calls for your secretary? And is your corner office a sunrise corner?
Sure, I think we could find a little corner of the basement to put you in.
If If you answered yes to all this, how about a loan? Actually, people with all the trappings of success are generally pretty comfortable with themselves. In fact, pollsters tell us that money does buy a certain amount of happiness, or at least makes a good down payment on it. But even the people who seem to have arrived seem to be still striving to get somewhere else. Why? Well, the truly successful people I know have learned that success isn't really a place you arrive. It's part of a life in motion. In other words, they're people who long ago decided to try to enjoy what they do no matter what level they're on. So rather than wait for the end of the rainbow, they've organized their lives so they appreciate every step of the journey. So here's a real test of success. Are you living a balanced existence? In other words, is work rewarding and life full? Then keep doing what you're doing. You are successful.
We've looked at what it takes, how to plan for it, how to achieve it. Now let's take a look at what it is, life at the top. In the end, satisfaction is the truest measure of success. But let's face it, things like corporate jets, executive dining rooms, and sleek chauffeured limos offer an enticing view of life at the top. And then there's the view from the top. For our purposes, the people who occupy offices up here are more impressive than the sights outside their windows. We asked some leading CEOs about the insights they gained as a result of changing from being at the head of the pack to being its leader.
You know, it's interesting when you think about CEOs, and some people will say, oh, that's the guy who's got the big office and the chauffeur and flies first class and everything is in top style and eats in the best restaurants and has a plush home and a happy family. And they don't look at it as that person is also a person. They make a model out of a CEO that's not really a model.
People have an impression that CEO, well, he just says what's going to happen and everybody does it. Well, it's kind of like being president of the United States. No, they don't. You know, Harry Truman said, poor Ike, he's going to come in here thinking that it's going to be just like the Army and he's going to give an order and everybody's going to carry it out. Well, CEOs like that. Organizations love to do what they want to do.
I think the person at the top of any company has to be the visionary. And it's critical that the people within the company know what the vision is. The people at Monet expect me to be the leader, to have a vision of what this company should be 5 to 10 years from now, and to be able to share that vision so that they can understand it and can participate in it. And I really view that as one of the most important things that I have to do in my role as CEO.
I mean, I have the outside world to think about, the press, the shareholders, the banks, the ratings agencies, the public role of the company. I'm the spokesman for the company, and all of those things make it a much broader role, I think, than one I've had before.
The people skills, the ability to articulate a vision for where the company's going to go, to motivate people, to pat them on the back, to make the tough calls when you have to make them, to give people negative feedback when you have to do it, but do it in a way that'll be constructive. All of that stuff is just that much more intense and that much more necessary when you're in a top job.
I think there's disadvantages to life at the top. I don't think life at the top is necessarily what it's cracked up to be, but on the whole, my experience has been that it's usually better than life at the bottom.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
When JFK set our sights on the moon, he was sharing with us a vision, not an observation, a vision. 9 years later, an army of scientists, politicians, military personnel, factory workers, and a supportive public had turned that vision into a reality. Obviously, vision is powerful stuff. This man also had a vision.
I've said this before. with the Chrysler people, they've just gone through the travail of last year, and they were concerned about their jobs and survival. And I've always learned that's human nature. We're banded together, and they're working harder and better, and they're doing their jobs better, and that's what spirit and esprit de corps is, you know.
At a point when Chrysler's 600,000 employees were about to lose their jobs, Lee Iacocca envisioned Chrysler as the nation's leading automaker. The word vision may sound like an abstraction, but not around Chrysler these days. At Columbia University's Business School, Mary Ann DeVanna has completed a study of vision among the nation's top business leaders.
Well, when I talk about corporate visioning, what I'm really talking about is the fact that a leader in an organization, whether that be a CEO or a head of a strategic business unit, has got to have some picture about where he wants to take that organization, some sense of where he would like the organization to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And then he has to figure out what he has to do in order to get there.
There's a fundamental philosophy that's got to come from the top down, and within that guideline, as you get that within people in the organization, they believe it, and it tends to sort of feed on itself over a period of time. So I view two critical things that the person at the top has to do. Is one is really imbue people with that old-time religion about what the organization stands for, and secondly is look forward and plot, you know, how is the world changing, how does our business need to change, and plot those longer-term strategic things.
At Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, Dr. David Bradford has identified an expanded need for visionary skills, one that now reaches into the ranks of middle management.
It was probably important for top management to have a clear notion of what we're about, but I think that the change in today's world is that now for the first time it's important that people in the organization, the middle level, also have a vision.
I think that the CEO has to carry the responsibility for setting that pattern and that chart. I think that the CEO who thinks he can do it without utilizing the capabilities of all those working for him is fooling himself, because he may not fail doing it that way, but he surely won't be as good as he would be if he used all that capability that's underneath supporting him in the process.
So if you take what is your routine day-to-day job and are able to capture the larger importance, that also gives you some clues as to what additional things you can take. And clearly what is needed today is people taking initiative. So the vision gives you a sense of the new directions you ought to move into.
I think that for middle managers, that the important thing to keep in mind is that they should be trying to carry out whatever the corporate vision is on their level. In other words, they have to translate it into what it means for their organization. But even if they find themselves in an organization that seems, for whatever reason, at loose ends, where there is not a clear sense of direction coming from the top, they should not use that as an excuse necessarily for the fact that nothing can be done. Because the truth of the matter is that there is something that they can do in terms of creating a pocket of excellence for whatever they have responsibility for.
Ethics and business are not mutually exclusive. In fact, I would make this argument that in about 95% of the cases, good ethics is also very good business. Good ethics is good management.
Kirk Hansen examines business ethics at Stanford Business School. Dr. Hansen has found that knowing your company's code of ethics can save you a lot of worry, and sometimes save the company. The best recent example, the Tylenol poison scare.
The managers of Johnson & Johnson believe that the credo which they had prepared before and which all managers were aware of helped them make good, rapid decisions. And in retrospect, having spent $100 million to recall all the Tylenol all over the United States, even though only in Chicago was there any kind of a poisoning, Johnson & Johnson came out best. They reintroduced Tylenol several months later. They regained 93-94% of their market share.
You must be truthful. You must be honest. You must approach things in a clean, competitive way. And to encourage or condone anything less than legitimate, open, fair, ethical practice would be a serious mistake.
As a high corporate executive, I'm often faced with moral decisions of one kind or another. I can't say that I approach them necessarily in the spirit of St. Francis of Assisi or the Ten Commandments, but I have, at any rate, enough common sense, always during the past 26 years, to say to myself, could this possibly get me indicted? Now, a surprisingly large number of people in American business are apparently unable to ask themselves that question.
It's more important when you get hired, but it'll happen. Suppose you're the assistant buyer on some piece of equipment for your company, and a supplier sends you some clothing for Christmas, or offers to let you use his condominium if you and your wife just happen to be in Las Vegas. There's little things at all levels of the organization, and you have to ask yourself, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? Wouldn't I rather just be clean and straightforward and not have anything that anyone could even raise an eyebrow about? And to me, the answer is yes.
Executives say it's easier to face ethical crises if you thought in advance about the kind of decisions you might face. Professor Hansen can help you there. He's identified 8 predictable ethical questions you probably will face in your career. 1, do your ethics match those of the company you're working for? 2, is your conscience clear about where you'll seek a balance in the inevitable tug of war between a new job and your family life? 3, do you know the ethical requirements unique to a new job assignment? Accounting and marketing departments, for example, involve different ethical challenges. 4, how do you balance ethics and profits? Should you close the factory or should you face more losses? 5, do you face up to your own mistakes? Even U.S. presidents have slipped up on that one. 6, if you discover your boss or company doing something wrong, do you blow the whistle? 7, if you change companies, what kind of allegiance do you owe your old employer? And 8, can you count on financial and family support if you have to risk quitting your job for the sake of your conscience? The bottom line here is that ethical dilemmas will confront you as you advance. The more you advance, the more weight they'll carry, and it is possible to be prepared for them. There are some powerful traditions in the world of business. They haunt us like CEOs long gone. But some of the homilies that ruled commerce a century ago are not gone, and believing them can be a big mistake. We rummaged around to come up with a few of those old chestnuts, and then asked today's business leaders what they thought of them.
When you think about the first in the morning and the last to leave in the evening will be successful, it seems to me that that's the janitor.
I think the person who gets the most done in the shortest period of time is the person who's going to succeed.
Time doesn't matter, results count.
I certainly respect somebody who's got the guts and the confidence in himself and the conviction of what he's standing for to contradict the boss. And bosses need contradicting.
If I had people who didn't contradict me, I would think they were not good. And you have to create an environment that allows them to contradict you.
If you take yourself seriously, you're going to have a rough life and a rough career. I think you have to have the ability to laugh at yourself and occasionally at your organization, because you're going to make a lot of mistakes.
Thou shalt not have a sense of humor in business is like saying thou shalt not survive in business. So you have to have a sense of humor. I mean, you've got to find some amusement in this position. It's got to be fun.
Life just is full of little laughers, you know. I always say God has an infinite sense of humor. That's what the manifestation you see the most. And he's up there laughing someplace as he flings another change. Here, here's a recession. Wow, you know. Wow, look at these guys, they're running around like fools.
I have a very easy sense of humor. I enjoy jokes. I enjoy having a good time. And why shouldn't you have a good time at working, as long as you do good work? Having a good time while working is just one of the hallmarks of success 1980s style. Just one of today's standards of quality that help make this one of the most dynamic and exciting professional eras in history. Now that you've completed our review of the elements, requirements, and rewards of planning a high-quality career, the next step is all yours.
We hope you'll spend some more time in these electronic pages. They've been designed with just that sort of repeat exposure in mind. And we hope the list of additional resources we've assembled, which is coming up next, will help you carry on where this hour leaves off. I'm Richard Hart, wishing you the best in your future. We suggest the following publications to continue your pursuit of a quality career. What Color is Your Parachute? Annually updated to keep you abreast of the latest in career planning and job-changing theory. Where Do I Go From Here with My Life? A workbook designed to help pinpoint and develop professional strengths. Complete Guide to Executive Protocol by Letitia Baldridge. The unwritten laws of corporate conduct finally set on paper. Self-Assessment and Career Development. John Cotter's award-winning Harvard Business Course. The Competent Manager, an in-depth study of managerial science. In Search of Excellence, the results of a study of America's best-run companies produce this examination of the principles governing a successful business. And in Power, Michael Korda demonstrates how to employ power, enjoy it, and fight it in others. Power and Influence, a practical guide to developing people skills that get things done. Climbing the Corporate Matterhorn, straightforward, common-sense advice for planning an ascent up the business trail. Managing for Excellence, a useful handbook for the mid-level manager who must bridge the gap between planning and implementation. And of course, there's the complete Esquire Success Series. Stay on the cutting edge with savvy counsel from America's leading experts in men's fashion, the world of wine, cooking for time-pressed professionals, persuasive speaking, and career strategies. The Esquire Success videotapes are available at major retailers. Write us or call us. We'd like to hear from you.